Hey, what's going on, beautiful jellyfish? Hey, it's Tracy. I'm here with a special guest.
Hey guys, it's Chuck. I am an ugly jellyfish.
No, this is vastly untrue. This is my friend Chuck, and we're going to be doing a video on his Teysa deck. Chuck, tell me a little bit about this deck.
It's exactly what it sounds like. We're operating on double death triggers, so a lot of the cards in the deck have death triggers, and there's also a full Reanimator package so that I can keep cycling through those delicious death triggers.
I just want that on a hashtag or a shirt. Delicious death triggers. Sounds great. Yeah, Teysa is super fun, and also you're going to really notice that Chuck is a foil-holic, as he likes to refer to himself as.
I have real problems.
Yeah, he really loves foily cards. So I'm really excited that you guys are going to get into this deck because it's pretty lit. So there are 35 lands in the deck. Let's get started. So we're first going to talk about artifacts. So the first one is Phyrexian Altar. This card's great.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it's an integral part of the way the deck functions. I have multiple sack outlets because gotta find some way to get those delicious double death triggers. Am I right?
Double dip death triggers. Yeah,
I'm trying to really double dip here.
Yeah.
Okay. And making a little mana along the way never hurt anybody.
Absolutely, this card's great. You also don't need to pay for it, so you can literally do it as many times as you need. This card's awesome. I don't think we have to say anything about Soul Ring.
So I'm just kidding. You guys know all about that.
I was like, oh, whoa, be my guest. Then we have Chrome Mox.
Yeah, I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this one, but this is a non-foil Chrome Mox. Don't tell my mom. Okay? But yeah, I actually own multiple copies of foil Chrome Mox. I left them in my other jeans.
I got you. This card's sweet. The art is really pretty. Do you like this one in foil?
It looks like a tiny anchor is what it looks like to me. So yeah. About to sail away.
Interesting. It doesn't feel like it looks like a Chrome Mox, whatever that's supposed to mean. Then we have Mana Crypt. I guess we'll just talk about Mana Crypt and Mana Vault together because they're pretty much the same thing.
Yep, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault. One of the reasons why I only run 35 lands is because a lot of my tutors actually are 1-drops, which gives me the freedom to fetch up on turn 1 a nice little Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, or Soul Ring. And so anytime I have like the full artifact package of fast mana, I usually try to run a little bit less on the land count. Usually pays off late game when I don't want to draw lands. So
also your CMC seems, just from what I was seeing, a little low on the lower side.
I do have a lot of my big bombs just come straight out of the graveyard. So or if I do have them on the battlefield, I cheat them in through the graveyard. So that's kind of what you're seeing here. I'm not trying to unless I really get bogged down, I probably won't be spending 9 or 10 mana on a spell with this deck.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So that's it for the artifacts. Now let's talk about enchantments. You actually run quite a few enchantments.
There are a lot, yep.
The first is Dark Prophecy. This card's really good.
Yeah, Dark Prophecy is actually a little bit of a lesser known card. This card actually spiked quite a bit after people started building Teysa. It reads, whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card and lose 1 life. And now, that will happen twice if your commander is on the battlefield. So this deck actually hurts me quite a bit, so there is a lot of life gain included in the list.
I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind if you are building Teysa and you are pulling some of these cards, or you're looking at other people's Teysa's lists as having some of that life gain. Cool. And the next, I don't actually know what this card does. Overwhelming Splendor. Whoa!
Yeah, this is a showstopper for a lot of people. The reason this is in here is because of a card called Bitterheart Witch, which I am now a little alarmed that I don't have here with me. Or maybe I do. I don't know.
In here?
She's probably in that pile. But anyway, Bitterheart Witch, which we'll probably see here in a little bit, reads, whenever this creature dies, search your library for a curse and attach it to a player. And obviously, if your commander's out, you get to do it twice. And so there's a lot of really big bombs out there for curses. Well, 2 really big bombs that I can think of right off the top of my head. So this is one of them. If people are playing any type of creature deck at all, or any type of creature combo deck, this totally stops them in their tracks. So definitely an interesting little dynamic with Bitterheart Witch.
This card reminds me a little bit of Humility on a bigger scale, or in a smaller scale in a way too, because it only says Enchanted Player, but this is really good to stop someone who's just completely out of control, really.
Yeah.
didn't know about that card. I learned something new today. Okay, cool. Then we have Dark Tutelage. Tutelage is such a fun card. Can we just talk about that for a second?
Tutelage.
It's fun. Okay, cool.
So this card's interesting. This is kind of like some of you guys are familiar with Bob. This is kind of like a Bob enchantment. I also do run Bob in this deck, which we'll see in a little bit. But, there's a lot of card advantage in this list. Lots of ways to draw extra cards, which is, very important to me personally as an EDH player. And also lots of ways to get extra cards in your hand, such as Dark Tutelage and Bob. So this is just basically so I can, see more cards than the average Joe as I'm playing the game I'm playing.
Yeah, card's good. This is probably one of the most beautiful cards ever. Bitter Blossom. Card's great. You get tokens, you lose a life, you don't really care.
This deck also, you'll probably start to notice a sub-theme. There's a lot of token synergy. So this deck makes a lot of tokens. It makes just an ungodly amount. And so I have Leyline of the Meek, which we'll see in a little bit, which makes my tokens bigger, along with the tokens of my opponents, unfortunately, but makes my tokens bigger as well. And I'm always going to have more than you, probably. So that's why I run that. But yeah, love Bitter Blossom. Love this new art. Man, that is just something else.
Dude, it is stunning. I think every art of Bitter Blossom is great, but this is probably my favorite. We'll actually talk about Leyline of the Meek next because this card is really good. I didn't actually know it said creature tokens, so it's general, but you know what? I don't think you really care. It's buffing your team, It's
buffing the team, and I'm making a lot of tokens, so, I'm okay with them being a little bit bigger. If for some reason my combo-centric playstyle gets interrupted if I'm playing in a high-power pod, it's always nice to have a backup plan, having an army of tokens that are a little bit bigger than they normally would be. Definitely not a bad thing.
I think that's one reason why Teysa is so good is she has both of those abilities stapled onto her, and I think if she had one or the other, I don't think she would definitely be as good. So
totally agree.
Sweet. Okay, Intangible Virtue, which this brings me back to my black-white token days in Modern, so I'm really pumped that you're running this card. This card is amazing.
Oh, absolutely. Creature tokens get +1 and have vigilance, kind of along the same lines. Only this affects my tokens only and not theirs. So, again, trying to outmaneuver and outpace my opponents on the token game on the off chance that they're also playing tokens. So,
absolutely. And if you don't have Teysa out, say she's died a couple times, this does give them vigilance. So if you don't have Teysa, it gives them vigilance because Teysa already gives them vigilance. So, and it gives them +1. One of my personal favorite cards, Animate Dead.
Animate Dead. Tried and true.
So good.
It's a wonderful reanimator card. Sees play in a lot of formats. Great in Commander. And it's also good to keep in mind that you can target your opponent's creatures with Animate Dead. It doesn't have to be your own. So, definitely a good utility card for Commander.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. And then we have Legion's Landing. This card's really sweet.
Oh, yeah. I love Legion's Landing, especially in this deck. Get to make a 1/1 when it enters. So you're automatically looking at 2 permanents for 1 mana, with the possibility pretty easily to flip it into a land that also spits out tokens. So it's definitely an awesome land. Love that it was printed. I really enjoyed the flavor of the Exelon Block a lot, so definitely a big fan of this card in this deck.
This is a very good card. It's also 1 mana. It's extremely, extremely cheap mana-wise. And then we have Smothering Ty. This card is really strong.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I love Smothering Tithe. It demands some type of your opponents basically have to play around it, or you're just going to get out of control.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy Smothering Tithe. I was super excited when it was spoiled not too long ago. I own multiple copies. Who doesn't love Ramp and White? We haven't seen a lot of that. So this is really it's a card that I'm going to put in all my white decks and have already, and it's definitely going to see a lot of play from me.
Solid card. Another card draw spell is Phyrexian Arena, very similar to Dark Prophecy. Was that what that card is called? Yeah, a little similar to that in terms of just drawing cards and losing life. This is on your upkeep.
Definitely, and this card's been reprinted a lot, so it's it's not as expensive as it would be in foil and non-foil. I love running this in all my decks that have black in them. So this is a solid card. Again, a huge fan of having extra cards in my hand.
Card is great, and the last enchantment is Proper Burial. A little bit of that life gain that we talked about earlier.
Yep.
Very important.
This card is one of the cards that helps offset the massive amount of damage that I deal to myself because I'm playing black.
Yeah.
So this will trigger twice if your commander's out. Whenever a creature you control is put into the graveyard from play, tokens included, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So if I have a 3/3 flying spirit token and it dies, I gain 6 life off of Proper Burial. So you'll see me, if you ever see me play this deck in the future, if you're ever with me playing this deck in the future, I've got a lot of dice trying to keep track of all my triggers. There's a lot going on with this deck.
Absolutely. Because not only do you have, like, tokens, you have all your creatures, too, which we're saving for last, because creatures are always the best part. We're going to talk about sorceries. So first is Unburial Rites.
Yep. Return it, then return it again from the graveyard. You know, it's definitely too good to pass up. This is an excellent card for Reanimator. Again, running the full package here. I've got all the good Reanimator cards. Definitely trying to recur and create the death triggers over and over and over again if I can.
Absolutely. Classic card. Another Reanimate spell is Exhume.
I actually really enjoy playing with Exhume. This is actually a great card against control, because when you do something for everybody, there's just a slight chance that if each player can benefit from it, that they might not counter it. Now, it's not guaranteed. You know, maybe a more seasoned mage will know to counter that, but a lot of people actually won't. You know, they're like, hey, let's all get a creature back, and it is kind of like a community mentality around it sometimes. And so
It's a more political card.
yeah, it's a political
yeah.
card, definitely.
Yeah, I'm a fan of that. Not a whole lot to say here, but Demonic Tutor.
Yeah,
Card's great.
Tutors are great. Obviously, the more you have, the more consistent your deck's going to be. I gravitate toward playing a lot of tutors if I can. They're kind of expensive, but you know, tutors are great. What can I say?
This one's definitely worth it. It's one of my favorite cards. Bone Splinters. This is a very strong card. Not a lot of people know about this, I feel like.
Yep, this is a great card, especially if I'm trying to sacrifice my own creatures. 1 mana. The value here is undeniable. You know, I get a double death trigger off the creature I sacrificed and get to blow up a creature of my choice. And that can also be one of my own if I want it to be, you know. If there's nothing else going on and I really want to get my engine going, then, you know, Bone Splinters is where it's at.
You could get rid of 3 things with this. You could sack 2 creatures and then kill 1.
Yeah,
which is really strong.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kaya's Wrath. I think this card gets a bad reputation for people misreading it. A lot of people think it means you gain life for the number of creatures on the battlefield. You don't. You gain creatures you control, but it's really strong with Teysa because you get, you know, you're having a lot of tokens. So this card is really strong.
Definitely, and if you have a loaded baked potato for a board state, you've just got everything out there. You know. Board wipes just got a lot better, you know.
Yeah.
Like I've got 16,000 death triggers. I'm like dealing all this damage. I've got gaining all this life. You know, a board wipe can be. There's a lot more meaning to it in a deck like this than there would be normally. Where I feel like a board wipe is usually an act of desperation in Commander. Like I have to do something or I'm gonna die. It could be more of a proactive thing in Teysa. You know, like hey. I decided I want to make a big move right now. I'm going to go ahead and blow up the board, knowing that I can reanimate my big guys and bring them back if I want to next turn. So, you know.
That's a really good point.
Yep, a little bit of an interesting take on the board wipe here. And this is actually the only board wipe I run in the entire deck. I'm actually considering running maybe a second or third.
Damnation would, I think, do really well in this deck.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, the next card is Buried Alive. I think this card is extremely strong and underplayed.
Yeah, this is a great card, especially for Reanimator type decks, which is obviously what I'm trying to do. My 3 targets, which we'll get to a little bit later when we go over creatures, but there are clear choices for what are amazing cards to reanimate in Teysa. So we'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, Buried Alive is an integral part of my strategy.
Card is very strong and very cheap too. Mana-wise and cost-wise, too. The next card is Imperial Seal, another tutor.
Yep, another 1-drop tutor. These cards are indispensable. This one carries a little bit of a hefty price tag on it, This was actually a gift to me from a friend, so I didn't have to buy it. And it was a while back when I got it. It's recently gotten a lot more expensive. But very fortunate to own this card and own multiple one-drop tutors in this deck. It makes everything run a lot more smoothly early game.
Absolutely. I agree. This card is so good. Innocent Blood. And you sack a creature, but you just don't even care.
Yeah, this is a perfect card for a deck like this. The value is undeniable, especially early game when people are trying to get established. Might not be as good late game, mid game, but early game this is a great choice when people are, dropping their birds, Llanowar elves, other things that are going to help them get ahead quick. You can go ahead and pop this, or even if you're desperate later and you really don't have a sack outlet and you really need that one death trigger to copy itself so that you can get ahead. Definitely a good card in all phases of the game in this deck.
Absolutely. The next card we've been talking about, Reanimate spells, so we have Reanimator.
Yep.
Classic.
Classic Reanimate. Great card. Yeah, it's awesome. 1 mana. You just get to do so much for that. There is a little bit of a drawback, which I hope I've done a good enough job of offsetting the major life loss that I do to myself in this deck. But I oftentimes find myself above 40 life in this deck, even though I'm like paying life left and right, losing life left and right. So it's not a huge concern that I have to, deal with the downside of this card.
Absolutely. This next card is extremely strong. Dread Return. So good.
Oh yeah, definitely good. And the flashback is, you guessed it, sacrifice 3 creatures. So a little bit of a sack outlet unto itself. Great value here. Get to play it twice. Definitely a strong spell in this deck.
Absolutely. And you just sack some tokens. You don't even really care.
Yep.
That's great. Or sack your value stuff that dies and you get double triggers. So good. I actually didn't know that this card existed. Resurrection.
Yeah, this is it almost seems like a color shifted card, but white does have its own fair share of reanimation. But this is it's a 4-drop. There might be a better choice than this, but I had one and wanted to bone up a little bit on the reanimation, so I went ahead and slotted this in. There's a couple of new cards I'm looking at that just came out in Modern Horizons. Vesper Spark being one of them that I'm thinking about exchanging, just because death triggers to itself twice, so I'll probably switch that out with that pretty soon, as soon as I get a foil.
Of course. This card is extremely underrated on Earth.
Oh yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
So good. Such good value.
Another 1 mana reanimation spell, and it has cycling. It's great. I definitely find use for it in this deck.
There's so much value, I think, that you can get off this card that I don't think a lot of people realize. Very strong for 1 mana.
Yeah, and if you're going to pick these up, guys, it might be a good time because people are experimenting with this card in Modern now that it is Modern legal. So go ahead and grab them while you can before they get busted and go way up in price.
It's probably going to spike, so it's a good speculation. Cool, let's talk about instants now. So the first is classic removal, Mortify.
Absolutely, got to have removal.
Yeah.
This is great. Creature or enchantment. Again, with the removal in this deck, good way to pop one of your opponent's creatures or enchantments. But if you're in a pinch and you don't have a sack outlet, you could also blow up one of your own creatures to take advantage of the death triggers. So all the removal and board wipes in this deck are dual purpose, whereas maybe normally they wouldn't be.
It's a great point. Not a whole lot to say here, but Dark Ritual.
Dark Ritual is actually part of what I would call an ideal opening hand. There's a couple of cards in this deck that, if I have them in my opening hand, give me an extremely high turn 1 advantage.
Yeah.
For example, turn 1 Dark Ritual into Buried Alive, and it's amazing. Or turn 2 Dark Ritual into Buried Alive and Reanimate allows me to get a gigantic creature on the battlefield turn 2. I'm definitely not opposed to switching the way I think about the game in the first 2 turns.
That's a great point.
So,
Card's strong. The next card I think is particularly really strong in this deck, which is Enlightened Tutor. You don't really run a lot of artifacts in this deck, but you do have quite a bit of enchantment, so you're going to find some really strong targets with this card.
Absolutely, Tracy. I think about the game differently in the first 3 turns than I do in the turns that follow the first 3 turns. So if I have an Enlightened Tutor in my opening hand, I'm automatically going to get a mana rock.
Yeah.
Automatically. If I have it in my hand after the 3rd turn, I'm automatically going to get an enchantment I need. So definitely adaptation and not having like mental rigidity when it comes to looking at a card in your hand is a crucial thing in Commander.
So that's a really interesting point, thinking about how you think about the turns. Entomb. Card's great.
Yep, Entomb is great. A lot of people don't realize that you don't just have to go get a creature card. It's one of the most overlooked things about Entomb. You can go get any card you want and put it in your graveyard. So it's you probably already knew that, but actually that was one of the things that I didn't know for a long time, and somebody pointed it out to me. I feel like we think about reanimation and putting cards in the graveyard as going and getting creatures more often than not, but Entomb lets you go get anything you want, including a spicy card with flashback if that's what you want. So, you know, great card.
Miniature version of Buried Alive, and it's only 1 mana, and it's instant. Super great. Super
Gotta
good.
love it.
Cool. Then we have some more spot removal. We have Cast Down. Note that it says non-legendary, so you cannot get someone's commander with this.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And again, this is all your removal is going to be extremely versatile in this deck as far as destruction goes. So great for their creature, great for my creature, whatever the situation calls for.
Absolutely. Not a whole lot to say there. I actually didn't know what this card did, so I just snuck a read at this, but Mausoleum Secrets. Undergrowth, so true library for a black card with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. Reveal it, put it into your hand, then shelf your library. I need to put this in Tassiger. This is so good!
Yeah, this is actually an extremely affordable card right now. There are people experimenting with it in Modern, so it could possibly go up in the future. But I made sure to get a big grip of these to starting off, because this is like bread and butter to a deck like this. And it's instant speed, so there's nothing stopping me on the end step from going and tutoring a card and then putting it in my hand with very minimal time for my opponents to respond to what I'm trying to do. So.
I also think there's a lot of people who see like cards like Demonic Tutor, and we're actually going to move into talking about Vampiric Tutor and think you have to spend a lot of money on tutors. You don't. That's a 2 mana one that's really cheap.
That's true.
Vampiric Tutor. Yeah. Card's
Vampiric
great.
Tutor, another 1-drop instant speed tutor. Gotta love it. Yep, again, like the last card we talked about that was a 1-drop tutor. Definitely in the first 3 turns looking to get a mana advantage with a card like this. Probably going for the mana crypt right off the bat. Set myself up with 4 mana on turn 2. It's you have such an advantage. So I almost always use my 1-drop tutors if I have them in my opening hand to go get a mana crypt. So that card may as well say, search your library for a mana crypt in my eyes if I have it in my hand on the first turn.
But in late stages of the game, this is super good. You can get anything you need. You can grab your board wipe, which is also, I think, a reason that some people may overput board wipes and things, but it's like if you have so many tutors, you can probably get away with running a little bit less if you're tutoring it out. And last, not a whole lot to say here, but Sword Splasher. Card's great.
Card's great. It's a classic. It's been around forever. People love it. People play with it. People will probably always play with it.
Yeah.
And I run it in every single deck that I play white in. So,
same.
Great piece of utility. Gets you out of a tough spot. I would not use this on my own creatures because it's exile and I wouldn't get a death trigger.
Hey, unless you're desperate. Sometimes you're in a desperate situation where you're like need life and you exile your own. Like it may happen.
That's a really good point. Actually.
Yeah. I think there's some people again who see a card like Path to Exile and think they have to spend $10. You don't have to spend $10. Tutor Splasher's like $1.
Yep.
Pick up like 5.